You think your life is hard with slow Wi-Fi and soggy cereal? FYI, you wouldn't last a single day in Victorian England, and the reasons are grossly obvious. This was an era where kids worked in sewers, doctors prescribed arsenic like it was ibuprofen, and the average London street smelled like a corpse marinated in horse pee. Let's kick things off with your first meal of the day. Breakfast. Forget avocado toast. If you were poor in Victorian England, breakfast meant stale bread and something called gruel, which sounds like it came from under the sink, and probably did. If you were really lucky, you might get dripping, a generous term for leftover beef fat smeared on cold bread. Not exactly a 5-star meal, but hey, it kept you vertical. Thinking of treating yourself to a medium-rare steak? That steak would be green and buzzing with flies. Without refrigeration, vendors disguised spoiled meat with spices or food dye. One historian described Victorian sausages as mostly filler and floor sweepings. That's not a metaphor, that's dinner. And if the food didn't kill you, the water might. The River Thames was essentially a flowing public toilet, so whatever you were drinking probably came with a complimentary dose of someone else's waste. Which is why people turned to gin, lots of it, even kids. Gin was so common it earned the nickname Mother's Ruin, and it didn't stop at mothers. It ruined pretty much everything. By the way, if you're already questioning your survival skills, hit that like button, because it's only getting worse from here. Now that you've enjoyed your lovely meal of diarrhea and regret, it's time to go to work, because your 8-year-old cousin is somehow more employable than you. Child labour. Congrats, you're now a chimney sweep. Your job? Crawl through soot-clogged flues barely wider than your own body, scrape ash for hours, and try not to suffocate. Oh, and enjoy the occupational hazard known as chimney sweep's cancer. Scrotal cancer from sitting in soot all day. Doctors literally gave it that name. And if you were a girl, equally horrifying. Many girls worked in matchstick factories with white phosphorus, which slowly rotted their jawbones from the inside out. The result was phossy jaw, a glowing, necrotic nightmare of a condition. It paid pennies, but your other option was, well, dying faster. And even if you survived work, the city itself was trying to kill you. Toilets. Unless you were rich, your toilet was a wooden box with a hole, or worse, a chamber pot under the bed. When it filled up, you chucked it out the window and shouted "Gardy-loo," which basically meant duck or get pooped on. That stench in the air, not just London ambience, it was the aroma of 3 million people flinging human waste into the streets every day. It got so bad, cholera outbreaks became seasonal. The 1858 Great Stink was so intense that Parliament had to soak its curtains in vinegar just to function, and even then they nearly shut down entirely. If you're enjoying this historical nightmare, make sure you're subscribed. There's plenty more where this came from. But let's say you dodged the flying feces. Next stop, the doctor. Medicine. In Victorian England, catching a cold was just the trailer. The treatment was the real horror movie. Doctors operated on vibes and mercury. Lots of mercury. Got syphilis? Mercury. Sore throat? Mercury. Feeling a little off? Here, have some more mercury. And not a dab, we're talking full-body applications, ointments, and sometimes injections. Side effects included rotting gums, falling teeth, organ failure, and eventually brain melt. But hey, at least the sniffles stopped. Women had it worse. Any emotional distress, sadness, anxiety, ambition was labelled hysteria. The cure? Electric shock therapy, freezing baths, or being publicly shamed. Yes, actual prescribed scolding. And if you want to look pretty through all of this, enter arsenic, sold over the counter in pills and wafers arsenic was marketed to brighten the complexion, because nothing says radiant like organ failure and irreversible poisoning. Even babies weren't safe. Soothing syrups for teething infants were often laced with morphine, opium, and booze. So yeah, one visit to a Victorian doctor and your survival odds dropped faster than your blood pressure. Fashion. Maybe you think you just blend in, keep your head down, and not draw attention. Bad news. Even the clothes were deadly. For women, fashion meant corsets so tight they rearranged your organs like balloon animals. These must have torture devices, restricted breathing, crushed ribs, and displaced internal organs. Fainting was so common they invented fainting couches, just so you could pass out with some dignity. And men? Well, fashion wasn't kinder. Top hats were considered peak sophistication. How are they made stiff and shiny? You guessed it, mercury again. Hat makers, exposed to mercury fumes in tight workshops, developed tremors, memory loss, and hallucinations. Hence the phrase, mad as a hatter. So no, you wouldn't survive Victorian dress codes. The fashion rules weren't slay, they were get slayed. Quick question. If you've made it this far without losing your lunch, drop a comment below with which part would have taken you out first. Be honest. Schools. Think your school is strict? Victorian schools were boot camps with multiplication tables. Children sat in silence, hands behind backs, under the threat of a cane. Misbehave? Cane. Speak without permission? Cane. Left-handed? Extra cane, plus a warning about demonic possession. One kid had his fingers broken for dropping a pen. Another was tied to a chair all day for failing a spelling test. Lunch breaks? Sometimes replaced with go hungry and think about what you've done. Girls weren't educated so much as trained to disappear. Needlework, posture, obedience. A diploma in becoming invisible. Poor? You might not go to school at all, and if you did, it was probably a one-room nightmare packed with 60 coughing kids and one overworked, deeply unhinged teacher. So next time you complain about not being allowed to vape in class, remember the Victorian cane. Asylums. Feeling sad in Victorian England? You'd likely end up institutionalized, and asylums were less hospital and more experimental dungeon. Reasons for admission included anxiety, grief, reading too much, or just being a wife who talked back. Inside, treatments included isolation, freezing baths, restraint, and the rotating chair, a device meant to rebalance the brain by spinning you into unconsciousness. Even worse, a man could commit his wife without medical approval, and she could be locked away indefinitely. So yeah, therapy wasn't exactly booming. So, would you survive 24 hours in Victorian England? With poison in your medicine, feces in the streets, and mercury in your wardrobe, chances are you'd sprint back to the 21st century by lunchtime. If you made it through this video without checking WebMD out of paranoia, give it a share. It really helps the channel out. Let me know in the comments, how long do you think you'd last?